Hi people, I'm Simon Drury, business psychologist, corporate mentor, coach and trainer at Art of Reinvention. I'm also a speaker and very nearly an author. I'm also an expert in the Pavelka House. Let me give you a bit of context about what I do. I work with people who want to effect a significant change in their lives, in particular a change to themselves, such as a new way of working, a new way of being, a new identity. Now, when I say identity, it doesn't mean helping hardened criminals who want to go underground with new passports and things. It means they choose to show up in the world in a different way and want the world to see them in a different capacity. Let me give you an example. A CEO who steps away from their company, who decides they want the world to see them as a skillful decision maker rather than a CEO. They want or need to shed that mantle of CEO because they're no longer in that role and don't want to be typecast. Another example might be their need to maintain an important position with status outside their work when they're no longer in the business. I refer to this transformation as personal reinvention. Most of the mentoring, coaching and training I deliver is to people from the corporate world, and many of my clients are leaders in their field. What I've recognised over the last 24 years of working in the corporate arena, not surprisingly, is that people are people, whatever environment they are in, and therefore have very similar physical, social, psychological and spiritual needs. One of these deeper needs is to have a sense of belonging, being a part of something of value, such as a team, a group, a club, a business where they feel valued and proud, and something they can identify with. This is why the element of family in the Pavelka House is a vital component of Jesse's holistic approach to personal well-being. You may be part of a group of people who stand for something that you value. You probably wouldn't belong to this group unless you did value it in some way. So you know how it feels to be a part of that group. Of course, it always comes down to a feeling, right? When we're confident that others in the group share the same values and beliefs as we do, we experience that wonderful sense of togetherness. Because we are essentially social creatures, we seek others who have similar likes and dislikes as us. When we find these people, we feel good. There's nothing like a shared experience to lift us up. Remember when you met someone for the first time and discovered that they went to the same holiday destination as you, or drove the same car as you, or owned the same pet as you, or liked the same films as you? How did you feel? I'll bet there was an energy increase and a feeling of connectedness with them. I have this feeling when I think about or work with Jesse and Jills and the team. You may have guessed that I'm part of the family element in the Pavelka House, and I'm pleased to offer you my services and support. In my corporate work, I've discovered that the social interactions we have in the workplace count for a lot for so many people. In fact, so many who move on, either through retirement, redundancy or career transition, report a sense of loss when they part with the people who have been a big part of their lives for so long. No more EastEnders catch up by the coffee machine or who won the footy. The relationships we forge at work often play a significant part in our work experience, which of course isn't always positive. We know, don't we, that we have to work at our relationships if we are to develop strong ones. There are some key behaviours that go a long way to helping this happen. Listening, showing empathy, and sometimes focusing on the other's needs rather than just on our own. Developing rapport is an essential strategy if we want strong connectedness and long-lasting relationships. In the world of psychology, we know that the need for reciprocal effort is required and even expected if the relationship is to succeed. We call this equity theory. Now, equity theory suggests that in any relationship, whether it's between two people, two teams or groups, two divisions, two functions within the same business, two businesses, even two nations, that there's a tacit expectation that if one party commits X amount of effort and commitment to the relationship, that the other party does the same thing. And all the while that both parties perceive that there is an equal and reciprocal commitment and effort to within the relationship, then things seem to go swimmingly until something changes. So for example, if I have committed X to the relationship I've got with someone else, and I perceive that they are committing X minus 1 to our relationship, in other words, they're not pulling their weight, I don't believe they're pulling their weight, then I can feel angry, I can feel aggrieved, and my feelings towards them won't necessarily be positive. Now of course, if you flip that, and I perceive that the other party in the relationship is committing X plus 1, so in other words, they're committing more, they're pulling their weight or more than their weight compared with me, then I can feel uncomfortable, embarrassed, even guilty that I'm not doing what I could be doing. So it makes me feel uncomfortable. And of course, when you get that disparity, that lack of equity, then that's when relationships can founder. There's another factor here that comes into play so often, and that is when one party compares the contribution of the other party with what they're giving, but it's actually comparing apples and oranges. So let me explain that. Jack is an expert administrator. He was employed because he's really good at all the back office stuff. He brings a level of expertise to the business which the business is really grateful for. He goes over and above the call of duty, he works really hard, and everybody wins. Now Jack comes in at 8 o'clock and doesn't leave until 6 most nights, so he puts in a pretty full 10-hour day. Rosemary, on the other hand, who's also an employee of the same company, brings a level of speciality to the business, and there aren't many people in her field who can do that. So the company relies very heavily on Rosemary's level of expertise. Now the thing about Rosemary's work is that she need only come in at 10 and doesn't really need to stay beyond 4. She gets her work done, like Jack, to a high standard and benefits the business. She goes over and above the call of duty, and the business benefits big time, as does she. Now the thing here is that Jack, in his world, sees not only Rosemary coming in at 10 and leaving at 4, so she's only doing a 6-hour day, but she gets paid more than he does. So he carries that resentment. He's comparing really time and also the payment within that time framework. So he's not happy because he's working longer hours and getting paid less than Rosemary. But of course, it really means that when you're comparing apples and oranges, as in that scenario, it really doesn't help. And that means then that the relationship between Jack and Rosemary can be a very unpleasant one, and it will have a ripple effect within the business. So if we are going to compare ourselves with other people, and we need to be very careful with that comparison, then we need to be very clear about the criteria that we are using for that comparison. What criteria do you use when assessing reciprocity in your relationships? Is your list helpful, or does it need reinventing? Do you have a relationship at work that is not as strong as it might be? What's going on in that relationship? Is equity theory playing out in some way? When equity is felt, and remember it always comes down to a feeling, and the shared perception is that all parties are pulling their weight, rapport can grow and the relationship strengthens. And the exciting outcome from that is that trust, mutual respect and loyalty maintained, and which are the characteristics of effective teams. Just before we get to an exercise, I want to share a few thoughts with you about your personal list of criteria regarding how you determine and evaluate the level of equity in your relationships. I've already mentioned time, effort, pay and the level of expertise in my examples. Other typical factors could be how the other person communicates with you. Do they keep in touch with you like you do with them? How do they treat you? How much do they offer help? And so on. If you're a big picture person, you're probably thinking big chunks. For example, do they communicate with you? If you're a detailed person, you may well think in smaller, more detailed chunks. For example, do they communicate by phoning you or texting? Do you always have to make the first move? Do they only talk about themselves, or do they ask you about you? Knowing whether you prefer big chunks or small chunks is useful personal awareness. More about that another time. Either or both are fine for your list. Okay, now the exercise. I want you to take a bit of time out to make that list of criteria about how you measure equity. You could stop recording and do it now, or after you've listened right through. To get you started, you could consider a relationship from any part of your life, personal or work related, a current or past relationship. You must be honest, and please avoid getting into a rant. When you've completed your list, think about each item. Ask yourself, is this a reasonable criterion to use, or is it a bit unfair? Have I set the bar so high they will never be able to contribute the same as I do to the relationship? Could I fall into the trap of comparing apples and oranges? Do I use the same list in all my relationships? If not, why not? What other factors influence my list, such as whether I like this person, and what does like really mean? Your list is a major contributor to your general expectations of other people, whether you know them or not. Certainly it applies when we consider how other people act. We all have expectations about life, and in particular how other people behave. When your expectations are met, you feel okay. The converse is also true. When your expectations around equal commitments to a relationship are met, you feel good, you feel happy. Again, the converse is true. Having meaningful and valuable relationships is such an important aspect of your life experience. Why is this knowledge important? In order to feel more confident and good about your relationships, you sometimes need to alter your expectations of the people in those relationships. Therefore, you may need to revisit your equity criteria list and make necessary adjustments. Obviously, this will have a dramatic impact on how you feel about yourself and your sense of well-being. That's it for this tutorial. I look forward to our next one, where I'll be sharing more insights into the importance of family as a key factor in your well-being and happiness. Bye for now.